Today, tensions continue to simmer between Russia and the West, this amid possibilities of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the latest, Russia has submitted draft documents outlining security arrangements. These are arrangements it wants to negotiate with the United States and its NATO allies. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said it is likely that President Vladimir Putin may hold another round of talks with his American counterpart before the year ends. However, there has been no firm agreements as of yet. The development comes as European nations huddle up, pushing their role as the mediator, as tensions between Russia and Ukraine reach an all-time high. During their summit held earlier today, EU leaders focused on preventing a Russian invasion of Ukraine. They threatened Moscow with unprecedented sanctions, while extending the option of diplomatic talks.
Where Russia has to de-escalate the tensions and to avoid any aggressive actions against Ukraine. Because we are, the European Union member states, all united in order to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and any aggressive action will be with higher political and economic costs.
At present, there are reports of a Russian build-up on the border with Ukraine. There are nearly 175,000 Russian troops deployed near the border. Meanwhile, Lithuania's president said that the EU should not underestimate the threat Russia's troop build-up poses.
Unfortunately, we see the concentration, reinforcement of Russian military forces along Ukrainian border. And probably we face most dangerous situation in last 30 years. I am talking not only about Ukraine, but I am talking about eastern flank of NATO, about Baltic region. And I think we have to do everything what is in our hands in order to prevent the worst scenario, which unfortunately we cannot exclude.
Speaking at the meeting, Germany's new Chancellor Olaf Scholz also warned Moscow not to cross any lines.
We
will also discuss the difficult situation in Ukraine, the question about troop movements at the border. And therefore, we will emphasize here again today that the inviolability of the borders is one of the very important foundations of peace in Europe, and that we will all jointly do everything for this inviolability to remain in place.
Many of the leaders said they look towards diplomatic talks to stave off military action in Ukraine. On Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was ready for any format of talks with Russia, but would still like to see a strong Western sanctions policy to deter Moscow from further escalating the situation.
We have also discussed the sanctions, and several countries expressed their attitude and decisiveness to apply sanctions. What we emphasized is that for us, it is important to have sanctions and applied before rather than after the conflict would happen. Because if they are applied after the conflict would happen, this would basically make them meaningless. And we have the war going on for 8 years. We understand that only if the sanctions are applied prior to the armed conflict would they become a prevention mechanism for any possible escalation.
Well, for more on this story, our correspondent Lucy Hoff is joining us live on this broadcast from Brussels. Well, Lucy, Russian aggression on Europe's border and now a strong message from the EU of pushing back against it. What more can we expect from the EU to try and counter Russia?
That's right, Nick. In a leaked communique from EU27 leaders that was due to be announced later on today, there is warnings to Russia of massive consequences if President Putin goes ahead with reported plans for an invasion of Ukraine, warning of a severe cost of such action. This is, of course, after those reports of as many as 175,000 Russian troops lining Ukraine's border. Now, this is due to be discussed by EU leaders leaders in a couple of hours' time. We know from the German Chancellor making his first appearance as German Chancellor at an EU Council summit today, reiterating that message of those consequences, but also saying that the EU should, for the moment, prioritise dialogue with Russia in order to de-escalate the crisis. Now, we know that the Ukrainian president has been urging EU leaders to introduce preemptive sanctions at this stage before any Russian aggression in order to prevent such action. But for the moment, it seems that the EU leaders are unlikely to follow that. They want to keep their cards hidden for the moment, threaten sanctions in order to prevent that action. But certainly this will be one of the key issues on discussion today. But we are not expecting any formal announcement of a sanctions programme at this stage.
And Lucy, just to change tack slightly, these talks have also been looking at the spread of the Omicron variant. How worried is the EU at the moment about Omicron spreading around the region?
It is very worried, Nick, and COVID-19 has been the first issue to be discussed on the agenda in this busy summit, talking about rising infection rates across the continent and, of course, that concern about the Omicron variant. We have had a warning from the EU's executive, the European Commission, that Omicron is likely to become the dominant variant by next month. And, of course, EU leaders here are watching the situation across the Channel in the United Kingdom with concern, given the extraordinary rates of infection there, particularly in the capital city of London. So EU leaders looking to coordinate measures to tackle that spread here, talking about travel restrictions today, given that we have had a number of EU countries such as France, Italy and Portugal reintroducing some border restrictions. In the case of France, closing its borders with the United Kingdom for anyone who is not a French resident or a national. In the case of Italy, demanding that EU nationals show a negative test before arriving on Italian shores. So there has been discussion about how to coordinate such border restrictions at the EU's external border, but also the rollout of that crucial third booster vaccine. There has been some discussion of mandatory vaccines, although that has not formed the foremost part of these discussions, as well as changes to the COVID vaccine passport after the European Commission suggested that there might need to be an expiration date of the current passport after 9 months, given that we know that immunity wanes after just 2 jabs, and giving the bloc time to roll out its booster programme. So lots on the agenda, and we are expecting a press conference in a few hours' time.